Hey everybody, this is Robert People and you're listening to People's Court. Thanks for tuning in. Today is Wednesday, July 17th, 2019. Have you ever had to give up something that you loved only to end up with something even better than what you previously had? Often in life, if you've lived any significant amount of time, you would have had to do that. Now, it's easier to know where you are or to enjoy it after the fact. It's easy once you've gone through the process. But what about when you don't know? Let's talk about how you felt before that happened, before you got this larger thing. Let's talk about that for a second. I don't know. Let's throw one example out there. Let's say you total a car that you loved. Okay. Let's say that smaller car, nice, cozy, something that you're, good and comfortable with. An accident happened. Nobody was hurt or anything like that. Let's just say that took place. And that basically forced you in whatever way to get a nicer car. Something that runs a lot better. Something that has more features in it, things like that. Now, no, everybody's not into, nice cars and things like that. But at the end of the day, you ended up with something better than what you had before. And not to say that it always has to go terribly or, accidents and bad things like that. But there are a lot of times where God wants to take something from us, or needs to take something out of our lives, to remove something, to make room for bigger, to make room for better. Now, while it's easy to, we think about it like this. You have, let's say you're someone who loves to eat, right? You have a small plate of something, someone comes along, takes that and gives you a larger plate of something. That's easier to deal with, right? That's real easy to be happy about. But we're not talking about, something that you don't really care much about, or that is, it's important to you, but it's easier to come to, arrive to the decision, okay, well, this is better to have the larger plate. I'm talking about something that you don't want to get rid of, something you don't want to let go of. That person, and saying earlier that nobody, people aren't, everyone is not always into nice cars and things like that. Not everybody wants to get rid of a car that, just because we all think they should, just because it's not a nice car to all of us. That car may mean something to that individual. It may be, it may hold sentimental value. It might be the first car they ever paid off. It might be the first car they ever owned. First car they bought. They've had it for a long time. There's all kinds of reasons people would want to keep something like that. And that's what I'm referring to. Now, how often has that happened to you? How often has that happened to you where you've had something nice, and or something you really loved, and you had to, basically it had to be removed, and you ended up with something better? That's all part of God's plan. Now, it's hard. I understand it's hard to really see that sometimes, because often what gets removed is something we've grown very much attached to, in all sorts of ways. Have you ever known of anyone who's been married for a significant amount of time and divorcing was actually better for them than remaining married? Even though it was a long time and there might be children involved, that could be something as well. And we don't need to nitpick about the fact, God doesn't like divorce. No, God doesn't like divorce, but he also doesn't like us suffering either. And that's why it was created. That's why it was put in place. But anyway, there's all kinds of examples out there where, we're either complacent, we love what we have, we're comfortable with it, and we just don't want change. We don't want change because we're afraid of letting go of what we have. Not so much we're afraid of being able to handle, what's bigger and better for us, but we just don't want to let go of it. The picture I used illustrates this very well. The picture I used for this episode, if you take a look at that, and you should be able to see it. You probably saw it before you started listening, but you should be able to see it in case you haven't already. And it's a picture of it, and it depicts God. God's talking to a little girl, and the little girl has a small teddy bear. Now, God says, just trust me. And the little girl says, but I love it, God, talking about this teddy bear. Now, God is holding behind his back a much larger teddy bear. And I really can't even put it into words better than what that picture shows. Because often and this is what we have to realize, what we have to think about. Sometimes the biggest things for us is very small to God. Not to say that it's not important, but God often has so much more planned for us, so much more in store for us, and our minds can't comprehend it because we're thinking in human terms. So in the picture, of course, the girl is looking at her small teddy bear. She might not see it as small. This might be a teddy bear she's had her whole life. She doesn't want to get rid of this. She may think that's the largest teddy bear she will ever receive. That's another thing too. We often think that where we are is as good as we'll ever get. What we have is as big as it will ever be, as far as we'll ever go. So that tends to hinder us as well. So my whole message here, my whole point of this is to really encourage you all to think about what you have and really get a sense of, do your best to get a sense of when it might be time to let it go. Not because it's just time to get over it or anything dismissive like that. I'm talking about because there may be something bigger for you out there. And as long as you have small, you won't get that. As long as you have what you have, it might be time to move from it, and that's it. If you've ever heard the expression, sometimes people, and whatever the expression is, I don't have it exactly correct quote-wise, but it basically involves people being in your life, they come into your lives for a season, and once they've served their purpose, they leave, or they're meant to be gone. And this doesn't have to be strangers or friends you meet on social media. These could be people that you know for a long time. They've served their purpose, and it's time for them to go in some way. Now, sometimes some of us tend to hold on to people like that. Or there's some obligation. Well, wait, this is my friend I grew up with. Oh, I went to school with this person. Oh, this is my ex. Yes, some people say that about exes. This person is a friend of the family, or whatever the case is. Could be a family member too. Let's also realize that just because they're family doesn't mean they're meant to stay in your lives like that. So they're not meant to necessarily remain, but we tend to hold on to it because we think, for one thing, this is as good as we're going to get, just like I said earlier. But there's a lot of toxic folks out there, and we know this. And letting go of that person might be the best thing for you because something is being blocked as long as that person is there. And when someone is meant to leave our lives for whatever reason, we often have to let them go. And I've struggled with this myself at times. Nothing I'm saying here is not anything that I haven't gone through myself or for the most part. Not everything I go through, but I can speak from experience on quite a bit of what I'm talking about. And we just have to be able to identify. Now, how do you identify it? It's hard to do because some people might take this to mean, if you have a messed up car, go crash it up and hey, a new car's coming. No, that's not what that means. And that's what you have to be careful of. Don't just, throw whatever away thinking, it's time to get bigger, or I'm just going to get rid of this because I want bigger, because you might not be ready for it. That's another thing. God doesn't always give us what we want because we might not be the same way shouldn't give our kids everything they want not just to be nasty or mean, but because they just might not be ready for it. And we want them in a place where they can handle whatever it is they're being given. So that could be the case as well. So don't look at this as you have something little, you want something big, so get rid of the little thing. No, it's not about that. It might be time. We've all been, I want to say most of us have been there to where We've grown attached to something, and all we're getting, and this is what you have to pay attention to, but all we're getting are those signs that say, okay, you know what? It's about time we got to let this thing go. It might happen all at once. It might happen little by little over time. And as long as you are focused on that, whatever thing is, you're not going to be able, or your blessing will be blocked to get that much larger thing. Okay, and I hope that makes sense to everybody. And again, it's hard to notice. It's hard to see, but those signs might be there. You really got to look at them. We think, of course, in earthly ways and human ways, not really understanding, what God's plan for us is. But that's what we have to make sure we keep in mind, is that there are things that, God wants to remove certain things from us because he has bigger. He has better. Have you ever heard someone say, this is more than I ever dreamed of, bigger than I ever imagined, better than my wildest dreams, all this and that? That's because that's proof that things can happen to us that our minds cannot really put together, that our minds cannot fathom, that our minds cannot comprehend. And that's where this comes from. Those people decided to take the leaps of faith or do whatever it is they needed to do so that they could be, in those places to receive. And even after they were willing to do all that to receive, even after that happened, things still took place that they didn't expect. People, I'm living the dream, or, so on and so forth. So just be ready to learn and to understand when those signs start coming up, when you start seeing those signs where it's time to let go of certain things, there may be a good reason that you're seeing those signs. There may be a reason, and it might be because something good is coming. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to come the instant you drop this other thing. It doesn't mean it's going to come today, tomorrow, even next week. But just take a second, take a bit while you're listening to this, and just think of all the times that you ended up better than you were before when you were attached to whatever before was. I'll say that again. Think about when you ended up someplace or with something that was better than you had previously, but whatever it was you had previously, you had a hard time letting go of. And then put it together and say, okay, would I have ended up with this other thing if I didn't get rid of the first thing? I can point to a lot of things right now, and I'm sure some of you can as well. But it comes with, it's hard. It's hard to trust. It really is. It's difficult to trust God sometimes because so much happens that we don't see. We don't physically see that. And that's the part that, a lot of people struggle with. Because, again, it's just not there. It's not tangible. So we just need to make sure that we're paying attention. When the signs show up, we need to go ahead and start listening to them and understand that, God has a lot for us. Where we are is so much smaller than what God has planned. And he has it for all of us. You're not always going to be in a willing place to receive. And that's another thing. You're not always going to be just sitting there just ready for it. You may have to get rid of some things. So often, God will put you in the right place at the right time to receive whatever your blessing will be. But there are often times where you're going to have to let go of something before God will bless you with whatever it is. Not because God wants to be mean to you, but because whatever that blessing is just can't happen while you still have this other thing, or you are in this other place. Sometimes the best thing, and I know a lot of you can attest to this, but the best thing that can happen to you is having something taken away that you did not want taken away. And once it was removed, again, you're glad it happened. So just be mindful and just watch for that. Again, this is Robert People. Thank you all for listening. Definitely leave comments. Tell me what you think. about me going to live. The last couple weeks I've done this live, so let me know how you have enjoyed these. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.